pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome everyone this morning and those watching online. We're going to try to be efficient this morning. We have some information here that we need to review. And item 1.04 is approval of the meeting agenda. Have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion by Ms. Lowe and a second by Mr. Henderson that we approve the meeting agenda. Any discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. Item 2.01 is public comment. I will call on those individuals who have signed in to speak, and if you will, come to the podium and state your name, and limit it to 3 minutes, please. Susan Tasker.
She's chosen not to. She's chosen not to.
Chosen not to. David Carroll.
You're back.
Good morning. I'm David Carroll. This will be the start of my 8th year as a Washington County Public School employee. I teach choir at Patrick Henry High School and Glade Spring Middle School. I have 2 school-age children, one of whom attends Glade Spring Middle. Maybe nobody has been watching the science on the coronavirus closer than coaches, athletic directors, and of course music teachers. It has deeply affected our ability to have an art form that happens at the same time in the same place. And we care very much about keeping abreast of new developments. I'm here to say that I believe this central office team did an amazing job with the reopening plan. I'm so grateful to the work that was put in by experts, by administrative assistants, by people in this room for developing such a comprehensive plan, while at the same time having to just do the annual work of getting ready for a school year. However, I believe that current guidelines have not caught up to current science. In the past couple of months, we have learned that it is in fact likely that children transmit the virus, and especially middle and high school students whom I teach are just as likely as adults to transmit and contract the virus. More importantly, there is growing consensus among public health researchers that transmission of the virus occurs not just from surfaces like doorknobs, not just from droplets that come from speaking and coughing, but that it is in fact capable of living in airborne aerosols. This is why choir became a headline. You know, there was a famous choir in Washington where they had close rehearsals in tightly enclosed spaces with bad ventilation. And as a result, over half the choir became ill and 3 members died. This was a community choir in Skagit, Washington. I am so grateful to work in a place that has such a professional team. But today I urge you to consider that this team needs more time to learn about emerging science to keep everyone safe. So I simply ask you to consider that we open schools completely online until we know when we walk in the building, there is all we have done has been done to keep students and teachers safe. I am personally not comfortable entering my classroom with all of the other teachers and students, even on the hybrid model,
30 seconds.
until I know that all of this science has been studied. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you. Mary Sunderland.
Good morning. Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Okay. Hi, I'm Mary Sunderland, and I'm a newly hired teacher here with Washington County. And this was actually my 3rd year applying, and I'm so happy that I got a job. So thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited. I wanted to speak this morning because I do share Mr. Carroll's concerns about the reopening of schools in person. And the reason that I feel this way is because You know, I've been trying to watch the numbers and the positivity rates, and yesterday I talked to the Virginia Department of Health, and they informed me that this region, the Mount Rogers region, has over a 12% positivity rate right now. And on July 24th, the Surgeon General and the CDC both recommended that schools not reopen in person unless the positivity rate is under 10%. And so I just wanted to, say that and just say thank you for considering this. And also thank you for having me again. And I look forward to hearing what each side is planning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who did not sign in to speak that would like to speak?
Should she?
Okay.
Okay. My name is Susan Tasker, and I have 3 children. 2 girls are at Patrick Henry and 1 at Benedict Elementary. And I understand all the science behind what's going on right now. But I also want you all to consider the children, their welfare, their well-being. I think that my children, along with other children, their mental state has not been well. And I know that some people say, well, we need to look at, their not being able to contract the virus and not getting sick and not spreading it to other people. But I think that if they could go every day to school, that's where I would put my children. I think that I'm not alone in this. I think that if at the very least the hybrid schedule needs to be effective and not completely virtually, because I'm going to face a problem along with many other parents that my internet can't hold 3 children online all day. And I know that a lot of the schools are saying, oh, well, you can come to the school, sit in the parking lot. Well, I work all day. I can't take my kids to the parking lot and have them sit in the car for 6 hours and do their work. It's not feasible. It's not feasible for a lot of parents to be able to help their younger children. I mean, yes, I have 2 older children, but I know people that have 3 in elementary school. How are they supposed to work and try and teach their kids on these Chromebooks, do these Zoom meetings? I don't think it's feasible. And I just wanted to, kind of give you all, and I know some of you have children in school too, but kind of give you a parent's viewpoint as to what, the kids are going through right now. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? You see move to item 3.01, COVID-19 data and reopening schools update. Dr. Rapp.
Good morning again, and I want to first say that to our board leadership and to certainly the people in the room and those who are paying close attention to conversations and interested in updated information, I just appreciate your continued efforts and your consideration. And there's a lot to think about. There has been from day one, meaning day one being March 16, and so a lot of things have changed. So I think over time, first of all, I want to express my gratitude to you, and I don't ever take it for granted. That what you experience, the decisions that have to be made, the walk that has to be walked, and the talk that has to be commensurate with that walk is very difficult when you have such uncertainty, and sometimes it doesn't match up. And I know how hard that is day in and day out. I'm grateful for our staff here. They've been unbelievable, and they'll continue to do that no matter which direction that we continue to go. And as we work with everything that we can and learn everything that we can to provide the best quality of education with the best resources that we have, and make the best decisions we have. At the moment, I just am, got a grateful heart for that. So, I think, Mr. Lester, if you'll go ahead and do this. The purpose of this meeting is really exactly what we said we would do, is that we would provide updated information, data, metrics regarding the current impact of COVID-19. What you'll see on the screen in a few minutes is exactly what you have at your place. And it's information that has only been shared, to my knowledge, with health officials and school superintendents. But we've been given the opportunity to talk about it. At our last meeting, we confirmed the implementation of our hybrid instructional plan with the delayed opening of August 24. At that time, we were unable to share some of the new data, and I explained that to you at the last meeting, and the metrics from the Virginia Department of Health. Over the last week, we've been involved in multiple conversations, and we've also been provided new metrics and data summary conversations, or have been involved in those data summary conversations with our local health department. In those conversations, particularly the ones that feel like a week ago, but it was just 2 days ago on Tuesday, we are now allowed to share important data set that, and the associated mitigation measures in school settings that are on the screen at this time. So I'd like to just kind of go over the facts of what we've experienced, and particularly in the last month or so, and what is before us today, just to give a good summary and an update as we said we would do. While the Virginia Department of Health does not give specific direction to us, we talked about that some at the last meeting. They don't give us a specific direction as to school reopening, but the document, and I'll avoid turning around and looking at it, and I'll stay focused on it so I can speak more clearly about it. But and I won't go through the entire document, but I wanted you to see this. But this document has been provided to school officials for consideration. Just a quick overview of this. This is what I shared with you when we had our last call meeting, where I told you that this had come out. At that time, this information had been embargoed. There was a little bit of communication that needed to transpire, and some people needed to come together, and we needed to hear the same message from the Virginia Department of Education, and now we have that. This guidance is for reinstating community mitigation measures, specifically in K-12 settings. And if you look at this, as you look at this document, there's some of the questions that have been answered, and we talk about science and data. These are the same questions, whether they be asked of us or asked of the Virginia Department of Health or the CDC at the national level, or if it's just asked specifically, or if it's just asked rhetorically. These are kind of the questions that are being cast on a regular basis. And what is the COVID-19 case incident rate? Is it increasing or decreasing? It's increasing. What is the rate of COVID-19 outbreaks, and increasing or decreasing? We'll talk about that in a minute. There's not been significant outbreaks in particular settings, thankfully, but there has been an increase in outbreaks in the general area. What is the rate of current confirmed COVID hospitalizations? It continues to increase at this time. What is the PCR test percent positivity? You heard that from one of our speakers in terms of in public comment. That is increasing. What percent of the COVID-19 cases are among healthcare workers? It's increasing. In Washington County, at this juncture, in far southwest Virginia, we have the highest percentage of that, although it has lowered some. But the percentage of cases among healthcare workers has been increasing, and we currently have the largest number of that. And that could be, all this could be proportionate. I'm not editorializing that. It could be just proportionate with our population size and the healthcare provision that we have here in the county for example, the different offices, but also JMH. And then there's other questions about hospital beds and hospitals, and some of those I have information on, much of it I don't. But I just wanted to give you an idea try to represent the VDH as best I can in terms of why they've given this guidance. And those are the general question, that's the general question set that they have as they approach giving some sort of guidance and asking us for considerations in K-12 settings. In our case, pre-K-12 settings. So if you look through this document, and again, you have a copy of that, if you're to look at one point where there's no community transmission, that's unheard of. At one time, say a couple months ago, there was a situation where there was a community that did not have any in the state of Virginia and in Southwest Virginia, actually, that did not have any community transmission. If you were to look at that in terms of the guidance from the VDH, then you would see how applicable Phase 3 guidance for Virginia schools would be, and how there'd be lots of, freedom's not the right word, but additional flexibility in the guidance for a place that has no or low community transmission. So that's where they come in, and when I'm speaking of Phase 1, 2, and 3 guidance, that's from the original guidance from the Virginia Department of Health. There is some contradictions there, as one or two of you pointed out yesterday in the conversations, is that, we're in Phase 3 in the state of Virginia, in Phase 3 guidance for Virginia schools, but the VDH information and the changing data would point back to consideration for Phase 1 and Phase 2. We'll talk about that in a minute. I'd indicated to you before that it appeared that we were in a moderate community transmission at some point, and if you were to look at that, moderate community transmission would would be consideration for Phase 2 guidance for Virginia schools, and as you know, that would be prioritizing in-person. If you're going to do any in-person instruction, prioritize those most vulnerable learners, particularly students with disabilities, English learners, and then K-3. So moving on, if you were to go to the section, I'm just trying to move through this as quick as I can. Considerations for schools in regions experiencing substantial community transmission. Now, this was written before they'd broken out the specific localities, and I'll share that information with you momentarily. But the considerations for schools in regions is experiencing substantial community transmission. Then consideration should be given for Phase 1 guidance and Phase 2. So you don't really have an and or, it's a Phase 2 and Phase 1 guidance. And you'll see that in most situations like that, their guidance, their overall guidance from Virginia Department of Health is to consider remote learning so let me make sure I get their wording correct. Remote learning should be considered as a primary method of instruction, and then all kinds of considerations. And again, this is not a comprehensive list. This is just general guidance that VDH is offering based on burden of disease, transmission, and trend. And then you would consider extracurricular activities, eliminating or at least limiting those, and then making your mitigation strategies more stringent, adhering strictly to physical distancing recommendations and those kind of things. So that's the overall guidance. I'm not a community health expert. There are a couple people in the room, at least one in the room, that has considerable more experience in that regard than any of us. But with that in mind, we need to take this as guidance. And so this is helpful. It is late getting to us, and that's not a criticism. That's just how the development has occurred with getting that particular guidance from the VDH. So I want to move on to the new metrics tools. If you'll fire those up. Okay, if you look at this is information that is not on the dashboard, unless, Ms. Morgan, you haven't seen that on the dashboard.
No.
Okay. That has not been made public, and it's not that it's secretive or anything like that. It's just, it's pandemic metrics that are done by those professionals that make decisions and share the transmission activity and the pandemic status of a particular region or a locality. And that's above my mind and pay grade, all of those things, but there's, it does give you an indication where we are at this moment. And you'll look at this map that you see on the screen now, and you'll see that things have really changed across the Commonwealth. And to the extent of how transmission has occurred. Again, I'm unable to explain why that's occurred. I can do that no more than anyone else. And I know you're not asking me to do that. I'm just presenting this to you as letting you know where we are with the burden of disease, the trend, and the the community transmission. So just looking generally speaking in far southwest Virginia, by the way, far southwest Virginia was only delivered as a specific region most recently. It was really from Roanoke-ish down was considered Southwest Virginia, but because of the way that the decisions needed to be made and be more localized, everyone has thought, and the VDH in conjunction with the DOE and others has decided to include far Southwest Virginia as a particular region, and of course that's where we're included. So if you're looking at far Southwest Virginia, on this particular pandemic status map, of this one that is on the screen was updated 2 days ago, but I can tell you the information we got late yesterday afternoon was exactly the same. Far Southwest Virginia is now under a high burden, proportionately speaking, of course, a high burden. The trend continues to increase overall, and there's a substantial community transmission. The next one, if you would, Mr. Webster. And this just gives general, again, I'm not able to speak to all the weighted indicators that are available to us and the burden by day, but you can see a steady trend that I'm going to talk about in my information and my conversation summaries with the VDH on Tuesday. I will share a little more information specifically about Washington County. But you can see where the burden is. You will see that we are substantial transmission, high burden, and increasing. All three of those indicators, if you will, are in the red, and that means that we are experiencing those trends, transmission, and burden of disease. Next is, thank you, Mr. West. The next one, you'll see a little more specificity. I know it's very difficult to read on this screen. Board members, you do have a copy of this. The burden, and someone had alluded to this earlier, I think it was Sutherland, I didn't say her name right, in her public comment, and what she was referring to was the case incident rate per 100,000, and then she was specifically talking about what is the PCR percent positivity. And you'll see that in Washington County, there's a flag, very difficult to read, even on your a written copy or a printed copy. But there's a flag, a benchmark, if you will, for lack of a better word, that would suggest that a 10% is a concern. And you can see we most recently we were 10.6% in Washington County. Now we're at 10.3, so we are above that benchmark. So you can see if you wanted to. Again, I don't have the expertise to speak specifically at some point. If this board should wish for Dr. Shelton or someone from the BDH to come to explain this in better detail as we go along, certainly I know that they are more than willing to do that, and they would be much better and much more adept at doing so. But it clearly shows in this graphic depiction, this graphic representation, that Washington County has sat in a situation where our trend has continued now. That number on the right top is the number of reported cases, whether increasing or decreasing. And you'll see the flag is at 14 consecutive days. Now, as of yesterday, in Washington County, that is at 55. So for 55 consecutive days, we have seen an increase in the number of cases. And then also the same, if you see where the PCR % positivity increasing, again, that flag is to be concerned or to pay attention to. It's set at 14, and we are at 25 days in a row. There's other information that we can certainly talk about. I'll do the best I can to answer questions about that data. As feeble as it might be, I'll make an attempt to do so, or get information that you should ask for that has been provided to us. Again, you cannot, from a public standpoint, go to the dashboard and get these exact metrics, but you can get something similar by just going to the Department of Health's dashboard. But it's not to this extent and this specificity as far as your local region. A couple facts, data discussion and summary points that I wanted to share with you, particularly in the last two discussions that I've had with the Department of Health. The facts are this. These are the facts. At one national level, and the rest is real specific to our community, but at a national level, there's been over a 40% increases in cases of children 18 and younger. In Southwest Virginia, as of yesterday, specifically for Washington County, we had 21 cases of 18 and under, which by population and infection rate is rather low, but it is the highest in the entire region. We had an additional one yesterday. I don't have that information. We don't have access to that for obvious reasons as to whom that might be affected, unless they're in our schools already, and then we're aware of that infection or that case, that positive case. The metrics now include, as I mentioned a moment ago, far Southwest Virginia as a region in terms of pandemic status, giving us a much more relevant now and accurate depiction, which is helpful. We aren't necessarily pleased to see what we're seeing, but we are happy to know that it becomes a little more relevant and specific and accurate, gives us an accurate depiction of what Washington County is currently going through. The composite score for the region, based on all those things I've mentioned, is increasing. Some specific and current data facts for Washington County are as follows. The cases that we have seen in April, as you know, of course, well, when I say you know, there's a little to know, but what we have been made aware of, and now in looking back, and I'll make a comment about that editorially in just a moment, but if you look back at the April cases, there were 34 in Washington County. So out of the gate, maybe for obvious reasons, maybe because of an outbreak that we had understood had taken place in assisted living facilities. I don't know what those exact attributions are. I'm making them based on what I saw, just like you had seen in the news. We had none of this data that I'm sharing with you now at that time. So I'm really not fully able to say that was the case, but the attribution at that point could be at least point back to a causal explanation of a higher population, as we've indicated. In Washington County, we have just south of 54,000 people, and so obviously we're the largest county or municipality in the entire region, and so that may be part of it. The other part was what I just mentioned, is that at that time we'd understood that there were some cases that were in aggregate at particular sites. I may be wrong in that, Ms. Morgan, but that's my attribution. And that was 34 cases in April. In May, we had 17 cases in Washington County. In June, we had 13. So that was a total of 64 cases that were positive cases with COVID-19 in Washington County as of June 30, 2020. Ironically, that was the time that we first put our draft out for the hybrid instruction plan. but at that point, there were 64 cases. In July, there was 106 cases alone. And as of August 12, yesterday, I may have this number incorrect. I think there were 6 additional, so really as of August 11, there were 63 new cases. And what I've seen this morning, I haven't received this information for August 13 that I'm sharing with you today. But I suspect by what I'd seen in the numbers yesterday, there's at least an additional 6 cases. So we're really sitting at 69, at least 69 cases from August 1 to August 12 in Washington County. So that would put us on pace, if you wish to look at it that way, to exceed 130 to 150 cases in August alone. So I say that to you just to say that our 7-day averages, first of all, they continue to increase. You can't look at it just day to day to day to day. That's maddening. You're really not able to get any good representation of the data. That's really just select and sort, and it makes it very difficult to interpret unless you have some summary points. And those summary points include what I just shared with you from a month-to-month basis, and also from the 7-day average. And what we know about the 7-day average, according to the Virginia Department of Health, and that's this presentation today to share that information, is that there's a 7-day average that continues to increase. On August 11 at 2:30 p.m., when I was on the phone with Dr. Shelton, that particular day, the day, of course, typically, from what I understand, what I've been told, is that the cases increase, and we have further reporting, Ms. Morgan, in the afternoons. And as we move into the afternoons, but at 2:30, in a conversation with Dr. Shelton, Washington County had 9 cases, which exceeded the 8 total cases for the entire rest of the Mount Rogers district. Now, that's not every day, but it was just a point that I wanted to make, that during my conversation to get some of this data to share with you on this day, that would include the Mount Rogers district, and help me out, Ms. Morgan and others, if I miss any, Bristol, Smith, with Galax, Grayson, Carroll, maybe?
I believe so.
And I think that's where we are from the Mount Rogers district. So at that particular time, on that particular day, that cross-section was, there were 8 total cases in all the other areas, and we had 9 in Washington County. One thing that I wanted to share with you that is a little bit concerning. First of all, when I saw this data most recently, obviously, you know, you can make, you struggle, and then you start to strive to try to interpret and to help give good information to not just to the board, but to the public and for yourself to understand what's this mean for us? What could it mean for us? We don't know yet. But so you start doing that. So, but I immediately said, well, that's a concern when you see that we're in all 3 areas, that we are now sitting proportionately in a place of high burden, substantial community transmission and trend. So I said, I'm concerned about our data set. And the response from Virginia Department of Health says, we wish to talk with you, we're concerned also. So that may or may not come into play, because we're doing things that are not necessarily out of the guidance, but we're trying to do things, and we're trying to pull off what we best can do, and I'll speak to that in a minute. I don't want to go down that path yet. But a projected peak for our region during those conversations, it still sits at mid-September. So again, I've yet to meet anyone that's able to say, modeling wise, to be able to say specifically what's happened. But now we're starting to get enough data that might indicate that there are going to be certain points that we can see with reasonable assurity that we're going to peak around this time. And so it's looking as if the entire region, and which would include Washington County, obviously would peak around mid-September in terms of a projected peak. Here's the big picture comment that was made to me, and it's left me kind of with a good overall view of this, not, again, not at a decision point necessarily, but gives me a bigger overall view. And it's really plain and simple as this, is that the comment was made to me, your numbers are not good in Washington County, and you're heading in the wrong direction currently. That doesn't mean that it's always gonna be that way or anything, but the exact words were, your numbers are not good and you're not headed in the right, you're headed in the wrong direction, trajectory wise, as far as all those three things that I've mentioned. When the original planning and the subsequent decision making to begin the hybrid model was done, the number of cases was obviously much, much lower. And we were firmly seated in, at that point, in the low community spread. We were not in the no community spread, but we were in the low community spread. Unfortunately, and beyond the control of anyone in this room or anywhere else for that matter, things have changed. And so that the timing, as some of you have said, is pretty bad. It's really a timing issue as far as our community. We're not the worst by any stretch, but we're far, far from being in a good spot as far as transmission is concerned. I'm gonna say this again, and this is where so forgive me for repeating myself, and just in my role, in my perspective, we all have advantages. We try to have a collective advantage to be able to make decisions. We've said all along, and there's nothing profound to anything. These guys around me know that I say little that's profound, mostly what's obvious. And what is obvious to me is that we, aside from the facts that I just shared with you, the changing trend, transmission, and burden, is that we do not have experience or the ability to have hindsight. And that doesn't always have to be here for us to make any kind of good decisions necessarily. I'm not suggesting you have to have that. However, it's very difficult right now because we haven't experienced anything like this, and we've known we hear differing opinions. And so I'll fall short of saying too much more about that, because then it'll become Brian Ratcliffe's opinion. And I sometimes don't even know what that is because of the changing variables. And you'll hear one time that it doesn't affect this, or it does affect this. And we all know that, so there are no excuses there. It's just a matter of fact that we don't have real good insight because we haven't had the privilege of experience. And so what we've tried to do, and I appreciate the commentary and the comments and the support from this board, is to make the best decisions. And as far as an instructional model, is to make a recommendation that we think will fit, to follow the guidance, albeit changing, or from the big book, from the DOE, to follow that phase guidance, to make the best decisions we can, still not knowing what this is going to look like when people come together. But I did want to share, before that should happen in the school communities, that you need to be aware, we need to be aware, fully aware, eyes wide open, that currently we're experiencing what I just described. And so those are the facts. I don't know, staff, if there's any other facts or data points that I need to bring out that you might share. I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but that I have not covered at this time. Anything?
I think there's a few variables that we need to consider too as to why we've had the increase in numbers. I think that back in the early spring, individuals honestly thought that once the weather warmed up, things would improve. Unfortunately, it had the opposite effect with individuals with summer travel, young individual boys and girls are in softball and various things. They've returned to that. They're out more and about. I mean, naturally, that's understandable. And also community fatigue in terms of putting up with this for so many months now. And we've had some parent-driven events in the community where we've had gathering of teenagers, which has caused a couple of additional cases in the community as well. And it's understandable. This is something that's so unprecedented. But, you know, we could be looking at more travel, say over Labor Day, which could even impact that September date for a peak. So, you know, I think we could eventually, hopefully, start seeing a decline, and we will. But we have a good plan. I really do believe we have a good plan, but it's all dependent on compliance and adherence to that plan, which in some cases might be difficult. Human nature is human nature. So I just wanted to add that to the mix.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. I don't know if I can answer questions about data, so if you put me on the spot medically or health-wise, I'll either defer or give you a deer in headlights. But I'll do the best I can in terms of explaining any other conversation and discussions I've had with VDH. I did explain to you at a previous meeting that we were in a kind of a, I wouldn't call it a quandary, but a flux there a little bit when it looked as if the guidance was really going to be commensurate with what we already had planned in a moderate condition or a low to moderate condition, but that has since changed and it's clearly changing and continues to increase. So we just have to have that information in front of us as we discuss and talk about reopening the schools. Obviously, the goal is to, as we've said over and over, is to get our schools back in. I pulled in the parking lot early this morning, and there was a bus starting and running over there, and I immediately felt better. So we all want that, we want to desire that, and I know that this board would like to move in a fashion that is safe and as reasonable and sensible as you can possibly come up with. I still believe, I've said this to some of you all individually, and a lot of people in this room, and this is just my opinion, that I don't, people say, well, I know that the board will, you all will continue to make the right decisions, and of course you will. You'll do the best you can. We'll do the best we can to make the right decisions. I'm not so sure that there is one of those in this particular case. I think what you do, you could make some really, really bad decisions. I do believe that the wrong decisions can be made considering what you just heard. And very dangerous and unsafe decisions could be made if you were to go to an extreme and just totally ignore the guidance and the data. But there's not, and we've said all along, and Mr. Music, I may steal some of your thunder on this one, but you've said it, we've said it all along, that we make our decisions as best we can, as calculated, as intentional and deliberate as we can based on the information that we have, the best information that we have in front of us. So, any questions at all?
Dr. Ratliff, it is perplexing and just confounding to me that we have information that our community can't get to. And we've got people making decisions about going to church, going to court, going to ball games, and we're seeing this chart with this bright red on it. And so when I attempt, excuse me, my mask is just falling off of me. When I attempted to go to this data that you sent us that says available at, and you go to the Department of Health's website and it is password protected. And there are people in our community who are clearly divided over we should go 100% virtual or we should go every day. And we're all trying to make decisions about the best thing to do. Why do we have this information and other people do not, or do not have access to it? It is just beyond me.
I know you're asking that question, hoping I'll have an answer, but I don't have an answer for you, except for what we've been told that there's been, I think part of it is just, for lack of it, I won't say this correctly, but the social engineering, so to speak, and being able to, not just to control the information, have control of the information, but to be able to make sure that it's put out in a fashion that is understandable and usable. Part of this is from a school perspective, not a community only perspective. I know they go hand in hand, but to be a little bit insular and unitary here from a school perspective making decisions, this is the type of information that we've been asking for and asking for assistance because we're not community health experts. So the only answer I think I can give you for that is that we have been asking for this kind of information, and then there was a decision point as to whether or not that is, that it's given for us to share or for the BDH to share as it sees fit to put on its dashboard. I cannot speak to why the decision has been made for certain things to be put on the BDH dashboard and not. But we have asked for this kind of specificity because it's been so difficult. You'll see across the Commonwealth, now you're looking at moderate, if you're looking at this graphic, and you burn in yellow and orange in areas that have already decided to go pretty much 100% or predominantly 100% virtual in their instruction. And those numbers have changed. That's what we've been dealing with, is constant change in numbers. And but I'm not answering your question about why. I understand that it's perplexing.
Well, the fact that we've now received this at a public meeting, would that make this public information?
Yeah, I mean, it is, we've been told that we can share this information. I don't know about the exact, like these graphics and models. I may have already, I know that others have shared them on the screen like this. I may have to ask to make sure that that's okay to do that, but we've been told that we can share specific trends and metrics. So as far as actually sending those out to the public, I feel like I need to do my due diligence and professionally speaking to make sure that that's clear. But you're right, it is public information, and I've been told that I can share this information. So.
Thank you.
I would love to hear from every board member your first gut reaction to this information in terms of your thoughts on, do we go all virtual or do we stay with a hybrid or figure out something else in between those things, if that's even possible.
Let me get Mr. Henderson, and then I'll get you in Albert. Oh, Mr. Brooks, did you?
Yeah, I was just want to ask, the information that we got on the number of cases,
Yes, sir.
do you have an age on all these cases, or a over 20 or under 20, or numbers over 20 or 30 or 40 or 60? Any ages along with that information?
I suspect I could get that. I can, only thing, yes, you can. So we'll put Ms. Morgan on that. She's good about grabbing that, but.
Well, if you don't mind me adding just something very quickly, I think more what you're looking at here is presentation. A lot of this data is actually available. It's just in various places on the VH website, and also there's a website for Virginia data. In fact, this morning I just went in and looked, and you can even get the percentage of occupancy for ICU beds. It's part of a hospital database. It's just more, I think what they've done is they've taken the data that is publicly in the public domain, and they've just presented it in such a way that it's much easier for superintendents to be able to make decisions without having to dig a lot to work on that.
Well
So,
said, well
yes,
said.
yes.
Well said.
But I actually did look at when, just before I did the presentation for the school administrations, I was looking at our average highest age group that we had cases down here. We're different from Northern Virginia and some other areas of Virginia where our larger number of cases have been between 20 and 29 years old. And you can get that off the VDH site, and it's just knowing where to click what to see it, but it will give you a breakdown actually down to the zip code area, if you want to look at that. But as our numbers go up in age, the hospitalizations go up, the death rate has gone up, but the numbers go down. So your highest group is at 20 to 29, and then we have had several that are from 0 to 10, 10 to 19.
I just had a question as a follow-up to that. age group of children 18 and under being tested,
Yes, yes, they are.
percentage-wise?
Percentage-wise, I wouldn't, I don't know that
Yeah,
figure.
so obviously our numbers wouldn't be very high if we're not testing them.
I think also that the testing rate, since the testing rate has gone up, that's also reflecting in knowing greater numbers. We've gotten better and better at the testing. We have more rapid tests available in this area now than we did previously. And that does have to be a factor you're looking at.
The only other data point that I have is one I referred to earlier, Mr. Brooks, and that was about the number, that was 21 out of 230 some cases. 21 of them are in Washington County are 18 and under.
Thank you.
Anybody else before I make a couple of comments? I think the whole purpose of having a special call meeting was two reasons, was to share this new information and data with the board. I think the ultimate goal of this meeting this morning is when we leave out of here, we've got to let the school community know one of two things. Either we're going to continue down the path that we started on, which is hybrid, or we're going to change and do something different. So that's, we've got to make that decision this morning before we leave here. So I'd like to, I said probably a 30-minute meeting and 50, but we've got to take care of business, and we all understand that. So, are there, yes.
I'll make a motion that we, go virtual, for the first month, for the first next meeting, not Monday's meeting, but September, because it said, some of that information was saying that it was gonna peak mid-September, and if it does, it does, and if it doesn't, we'll know by then, just about. We're already ready to go virtual. We spoke of that if we had to. So I'll make a motion that we, go virtual starting August the 24th, and keep hybrid on the back burner until, the numbers go down in our region.
Do I have a second?
That was on the 20th.
We're supposed to start school the 24th, correct?
Yes, sir.
We're supposed to start back on the 24th, that's correct. Motion fails due to lack of second.
Chair, I'd like to hear a recommendation from the administration. I know that we've got go virtual, we've got, we have also on here, the guidance says that pre-K 3 and special populations go. I'd like to hear the administration's recommendation.
I don't know, Ms. Lowe, that I have a specific recommendation because of where we are. I do know that I think if we were to have options, I think the only options are, and there's one thing I failed to mention to you as part of that question regarding the administrative recommendation is that if we're going to go hybrid, we're going to continue with our plan, which I agree is a really good plan. The data suggests that it's going to be very, very difficult to implement that plan. That's one option is if we were to go with our hybrid plan, according to the VDH, and again, I failed to mention that, strongly recommended from Dr. Shelton that we increase and make more stringent our mitigation measures to include mask wearing all the time and reference back to being in mask-free zones or making opportunities for them to have a break from the mask, like I mentioned before. If we're, with the data that we have, if we're going to move forward in that fashion, then I think that we need to have some real strong discussions about mask coverings and face masks and other mitigation measures that would be in place. It would seem to me that the data is telling us to be very cautious about starting school in person to a large degree right now, to any degree. I mean, if you were to look at the guidance would suggest that that we really careful about moving forward with in-person instruction. It doesn't give you.
Can I? Go ahead.
Has there been any consideration made, I know we've delayed school starting once. Has there been any consideration made to starting with a hybrid model after Labor Day?
I think what the board, you all could talk that through with us. But as far as our conversations, yeah, we've had all of those, Mr. Fleener. We've talked about that being a possibility. But again, with the data, makes it a little bit concerning that you'd say right after Labor Day, because we've been told that if our reasoning for doing that is based on what we currently are having, and our peak is mid-September, if we can rely on that, then I'd be a little concerned about saying. And the other thing is the inconvenience for everybody over and over and over again to keep kicking the can down the road. And just to be frank, I think that makes it a little difficult. But I do think that there's merit to considering implementation of a really well-designed plan. And we do feel that way, and we've gotten great confirmation from the Virginia Department of Health that our plan is good, particularly in terms of the mixing and the cohorts and the cleaning in between, as we've talked about before. But as far as after Labor Day, with a hybrid start, if our reason is to be concerned about the data, we just have to keep in our minds that our peak is mid-September.
Can I say something? And I guess I've had, Dr. Ratliff not talked about this on Tuesday and planning this meeting this morning, so, sometimes the board chair has a little more information, sometimes quicker than others do, so I've had a little more time than you have to think things through, and I sort of threw this out there, and I'm gonna throw it out to you. What I would like to see us do is start back 100% virtual and set that down for 6 weeks. Say we're gonna go back to 100% virtual for 6 weeks. In 4 weeks, we would evaluate it. We would evaluate it in 4 weeks, and we would determine at that time whether we were gonna continue virtual or whether we were going to try 2 weeks after that 4-week period to go back on a hybrid schedule. And based on, of course, I didn't have the information even then, but that even works in better with the peak of mid-September. You would know whether we had peaked or whether we were on a decline and things were going in the right direction. I think the 6-week and the 4-week, what that does, instead of changing back and forth all the time, you give families and communities and staff, you give them an opportunity. They've got a 2-week period there that we're not gonna make a decision on a dime, that we're gonna make a decision 2 weeks prior to continuing or 2 weeks prior to changing what we're doing.
So you're saying 4 weeks start the 24th, or 6 weeks start the 24th?
6 weeks start the 24th, and that in 4 weeks that we evaluate whether we continue beyond the 6 weeks or whether we change it at the end of 6 weeks. But that, you've got to give folks some time. You can't come in on Monday night and say, okay, next Monday we're going to do something different. That gives everyone 2 weeks notice that you got a plan to continue down the same path we're on, or 2 weeks we're going to change what we're doing. And I think in 4 weeks, based on what we've heard, you're going to be about mid-September. So that gives you a little, you'll be about mid-September after the start of school. You'll be at least late part of September. But that's my thoughts. I don't know how anyone else.
I guess my question would be, Dr. Ratliff, when we get information from the Virginia Department of Health, are they going to hold back, and are we going to continue to get what we're getting weekly, monthly, or what?
It hasn't been completely this way, but it's been lately daily. So we get daily metrics, even over the weekend. I got some.
Because if we'd had these metrics early, you know, depending on what's going on, if we need this information early. And I'm not killing the messenger, I'm telling you that right now.
Yes, sir.
I'm not talking about Virginia.
No, I understand.
We could have made probably a good, we made a great decision on the information we had at the time.
Yes, sir.
But now, you know, we're in the red and we gotta get something done.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Brooks?
Yep. And I don't have a problem with, doing some classes on the virtual level. But I'll tell you, there's a lot of parents or a lot of kids out there, a lot of students out there in pre-K, first and second grade, raised by parents that don't have a lot of knowledge about the internet. Also, they don't have the capability of having that at that particular time. And got a lot of grandparents out there that don't have the knowledge and raising those grandkids. Those kids right on that level right there are not going to get what they need, what the others will get, the older students. So
I'm not arguing with you, but let me flip the coin. Is it worth putting those grandparents' life at risk to get those children in school?
Well,
I mean, because, you know, that's the thing about it. These kids may not even show symptoms, but they're gonna carry it home to, as you said, grandparents and parents and
Absolutely.
aunts and uncles that may ultimately end up dying from something that's been carried home from school. So, you know, you can always look at the pros and cons, but I think based on the information that we're seeing now, we're talking about a matter of life and death. I mean, it's that serious, and I think that's what we're faced with. Do we want to send kids back to school and put the entire community's health at risk?
nobody.
That's my opinion. That's what I'm struggling with. And I know the education's important, but life's, and my priorities are a little more important right now than we can make up education somewhere along the way. We can make it up, but this other, we don't have the ability to control that. But that's my opinion, Mr. Brooks, and I'm not, and I understand what you're saying.
I understand, and, but you don't, there's not, I've not heard of many cases, or read of very many cases, or seen it on television or on the news of 5, 6, and 7, and 8-year-old kids been involved with it.
But they may have it.
They might have, they might not have, but anyway, I understand. That's just my thoughts.
You want to put what you said, Tom, Mr. Chairman?
Let me see, Ms. Hamilton.
I'm not against going 100% virtual, but I would like to think that we can take care of our vulnerable populations, because I think that's in phase 1, and being able to accommodate those who really need face-to-face time to have that stability in small, obviously way smaller numbers. I also think it's important that teachers have time to connect with their students. And is there a way to do that where less people come into the schools or outside and meet and have some kind of face-to-face time, like a field day, but not, playing with each other? Yes. I just think there's gotta be a way, even if it takes up a whole week, where a quarter of the population in that school comes in to meet their teacher. And is that dangerous? I don't know. I'm not completely sold on it, but I think, can we better set them up for a virtual experience? And to me, having some kind of connection with that teacher is gonna set the tone for that.
With our help center, Dr. Nolan, if these, like Mr. Brooks was talking about, like some of these parents who are struggling to help kids at home, could they bring those kids to the help center in this situation if we go virtual?
That's our plan, to have that open for families to use, yes.
With very strict mitigation.
Right, exactly, yes, sir.
I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Go ahead.
Well, this is the way I look at it. I want students to be in school just like all of us. I mean, we wish we would have started August 10th. Every kid, up to 7,000 kids, were in school. All of our teachers were working. Actually, they'd be teaching today. And we wouldn't be worried about any of this. So I hope everybody understands. I think this full board, that's what we want, and that's what everybody would want to happen. Okay, so I don't want any consternation out there thinking, well, you all don't want to go, or nobody's want to go. That's not the case. And everybody's opinion that's been discussed today is correct. There's nobody that you can say this is right, this is wrong, or whatever. But just to give you a very simplistic way of looking at it, if we go virtual and there's a large transmission increase, there are major outbreaks in our school, and we're the petri dish of infection, we made the wrong decision. If we go virtual and the transmission rates go down, and there's all of a sudden a vaccine available, and there's medicine or prescriptions that are available to assist those people who may have this virus, we were wrong again. You flip those two words, not the definitions. You flip the words, put virtual with my first description and hybrid with the second description. We were the smartest people that ever lived. So my point is, the decision, there is no right or wrong, in my mind. Because you do one thing and things go the way that you have led your division and led your students into, and heaven forbid a death of a staff member or an employee, or heaven forbid someone at home being treated unfairly when maybe if they were at school, they wouldn't have been treated that way. All you have to do is flip those two, virtual or hybrid, and put them with the situations I gave you. In one situation, you're absolutely correct, and you made the absolute right decision. You flipped the words, you were wrong in both of them. How does that choice be made?
That's why we make big bucks. Question for you.
I just had a couple, one question and then one other comment. If we go 100% virtual, I know the hybrid plan was, with the A groups and the cohorts, and having instruction on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. If we go 100% virtual, will we have instruction 5 days a week?
We would certainly have to work through those details. If we were to go that route for just a predetermined amount of time with the whole intention of getting back in person as soon as we can, I would recommend, because we feel like we would be going toward a hybrid first before you would all in, unless the numbers really, like Dr. Brandon just explained, if they go a different direction, then you're at a place where you can say, wait a minute, we can really do this differently now. We can add to this and expand it. But given the circumstances and the way it's been going, I doubt very seriously we'd be able to go anything beyond a hybrid approach at that point. So my first response, and we've talked about this some here, is my first response is, it seems like it would be, and this may be not the best decision, but it seems like it would be prudent to consider our work schedules and our instructional schedules to fit what's going to come. And does that make sense? So virtually, you're already practicing certainly your instructional model, but you just happen to be doing that virtually at first, and then you go back into your hybrid. So I would think that we're going virtually, predominantly virtually, based on some of the comments that Ms. Hamilton brought up, that we would need to consider about certain vulnerable populations. If we were going predominantly, mostly virtual, then I would think our schedule and our instruction should mirror what we're getting ready to phase into. Does that make sense? So that would be that Monday, Tuesday, and then Wednesday be a remote kind of, for the same purpose as we had before, because then we're accustomed to and prepared for that model to be implemented. So you do the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday primary instruction days with remote and some of the other facets. Is that close to what we're trying to say. I don't know, Dr.
It would just be all kids instead of just AB,
Yeah.
instead of half. It's all kids, all 4 days.
Yes, and it would be all, an opportunity for our staff to do that remotely and work with, you know, some of the features about the tutoring and help me out, Dr. Some of the other
Tutoring,
things.
collaboration, planning,
Review.
lesson development, review, those type of things. Keep the same format, basically, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, with Wednesday being that opportunity for staff to work together for mediation, for intervention, for tutoring, lesson plan development, all that stuff.
So if we're gonna go with that model, I think it stands to reason. This is just my, again, our initial thought would be that let's go ahead and if we go this route and you bridge into hybrid instruction, that's the model that you choose to.
Just to be consistent, so there will not be that
That's
big
right.
change or difference.
It helps everybody, helps the students, certainly helps our staff. And the sooner the better we move into that model, you know, the sooner the better in terms of that regard. But the transition in concept would be much smoother if we just kept that the way it is.
I also wondered too, if the virtual, you're talking about 6 weeks, if it's best to just do 9 weeks to keep it in the way we normally do, the
Graded
rhythm.
period.
Yeah,
I'm-
just a thought.
Yeah, I mean, nine weeks is probably work better. And if we, you know, we could say we're gonna evaluate in either 6 weeks or 7 weeks. I don't want us making decisions to drop a hat. I think if you're gonna do something, you can't say, well, we're gonna do it for 2 weeks and we're gonna look at it. We've got to remember that we've got folks' lives out there and families and stuff that I just threw out the 6 weeks. I mean, the 9 weeks grading period makes sense. Dr. Rapp and I talked a little bit about that. I sort of threw the idea at him. So, would you be hung up on
No,
6 or 9, or would the 9 make more sense than the 6?
I might defer to, we put each other on the spot all the time, Dr. Noe, a little bit from an instructional period standpoint. I don't want to say something that would make it really cumbersome for everybody, Dr. Noe. So if you have some just initial thoughts, please share them. If not, I'll be glad to answer that question the way I see it, but I'd rather defer to you on that one.
I think that's at the discretion of the board. We can make that work either way. Our staff have been preparing to somewhat, hopefully, treat as if every student is virtual, yet if we run the hybrid, some were there and some were not. And we'll make that work based upon the data and what's needed.
My question about that would be, what's best for kids on instructionally from 6 versus 9? Because I had written down the same question. It's 3 more weeks we may be leaving kids at home, and we might be able to get them in our buildings.
Yes, ma'am.
And a follow-up to my question previously, are teachers going to be working in school, or are they going to be working remotely? If we go virtual.
We talked about that. You go ahead. We summarized about 4 times yesterday, so you go ahead.
We tossed that around, yes. At this point, based upon guidance from the board, our recommendation would be that teachers still work in the building 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, with Wednesday being remote work. We feel that there's some consistency with that and some productivity that's enhanced a little bit for them doing that. It also provides the opportunity for collaboration. We still have, as we've indicated, we still have growth and get better with virtual learning than what we are currently. I know some are very prepared and some are prepared, but we still have a lot of growth to do. And that would give the opportunity for that to occur.
And additionally, there's I call it an anchor point, and a couple of you have indicated the same. You probably say it better than I do, but there's anchor points, and that anchor point is in the workplace where you're, it may address some of the concerns that Mr. Brooks has shared. It allows for our staff to be in a place where it's a hub. It's where their Wi-Fi is more consistent most of the time, right, Mr. Lester? Most of the time we can count on the Wi-Fi being available in a more consistent fashion, and it sets the tone for access. and availability in a school setting, so it makes it more of a school opportunity for parent, grandparent, child, student access. Are there any other points that anyone else would like to make about that? So I think it'd be, a decision would be as much as we can, as we have our teachers in place, following those mitigation measures, practicing those, modeling those, and experiencing those, so that as we move forward into more in-person instructional opportunities, that we're already set in that mindset that school life looks far different than what it did before, but it's there, and there's that level of consistency and expectation from whether it's a virtual experience, partial in-person or full in-person. Those expectations remain, that we have some sort of consistency from an academic programming and instructional methodology standpoint, delivery standpoint, I guess is a better way of putting it, Dr.
Yes.
I would assume that we would have some flexibility for some of our, particularly our teachers who may be quarantined at home due to
Yes.
family members and various things who could teach from home.
Dr. Wallace and I talked about that, Ms. Lowe, yesterday, and Dr. Noe in my office. We would feel like that we would continue to look at that by case, and we'll do that with using your word, a measure of flexibility that maybe we didn't have in another situation because of community and larger groups, or the lack thereof. There may be greater flexibility to work, and he'll work with those individuals that might need that.
Mr. Brewer.
Yeah, there's no doubt, whatever plan we come up with, when the teachers are the ones and the ones in the buildings, there needs to be online and knowing what they need to do in order to take care of and do the things that we need to do for that particular plan. So they're the first ones that needs to be trained and have an opportunity to do what they need to do. But I still think we need to get the kids back in the school as quick as we can.
Yes, sir. And I want to clarify something. What I just said wasn't flexibility in terms of individual circumstances. That we can't take that into consideration. That would also be maddening for every single situation that someone might have. The workplace is the workplace, and the expectation is to be in the workplace. What I meant by that was that if there's a condition or a situation that might be able to be, it needs to be considered for whatever reason, then that would be a human resource case-by-case decision. So I want to make sure that that's clear, that I'm not suggesting that people would add their own personal circumstances to the mix for consideration. I think that would cause, frankly, I think it would cause inconsistency and confusion and rather unnecessary frustration in the workplace. My opinion.
Let me say one more time, the reason I was originally thinking 6 weeks is I thought it was a reasonable amount of time for things to happen. And, I mean, you could go 9 weeks. I thought there was maybe a possibility of a long period of time, but maybe get the kids back in school after 6 weeks versus 9 weeks, which is the ultimate goal. And Dr. Brandon, you made some really good points, and you're exactly right in what you said. You're right. See, we don't know.
Now, Dr. Ratliff, too.
Yes, sir.
We go virtual. We will have our food service folk and the bus drivers, of course, will still have.
There could be some possibilities for that. Right now, it'd be on-site pickup, like we did drive-through pickup. But in terms of employment, obviously, if we were to go for just a period of time, that we're already saying up front that we'll transition from virtual to in-person, and however fashion that occurs, those employees would still remain in capacities that there may be a whole nother set of opportunities and needs for those people to engage in their work. There's still some brewing with some learning center and childcare and all kinds of other things, maintenance, and possibilities for our staff to continue to help our schools be prepared as we transition in. Because we're at this juncture, our hope, well said by Dr. Brandon, is that everyone's desire, and we've said this before, is that everyone's desire is that we go back as full-time as we can and as fast as we can and as much as we can. I guess full-time is much, but as much as we can, that we have those kind of life experiences for our kids and for our staff. So we want to make sure that we keep everyone engaged and working toward that, and we're thinking, we're not thinking long-term, we're thinking shorter term. If we're during this time where those three indicators are very, very high in our community.
If that's a decision this board makes, I think our mitigation strategies for this amount of numbers in a building can be strengthened a little bit, just because the worst thing we'd want to have then is to have an outbreak of teachers, that do that. So maybe, with temperature checks, I know we're asking them to self-screen and they're sort of on their own for that, but I mean, when you've got a reduced number of people coming into the building, maybe we could add some additional, mask, or if you're in a group, if they have a meeting or collaborating, they still have their mask on, that they get their temperature checked, just some things, some added mitigation efforts that might help us if we're protecting our kids, then we're protecting our staff as well, because someone could come unknowingly. And unfortunately, I deal in this stuff, and there have been situations where that has not happened and the person was asymptomatic, but then it multiplied into 4, 6, 8, 12 after the tracing was done in a school, okay? So then they were without 12 teachers for 14 days. So I don't think we lax and maybe even strengthen our mitigation efforts if that's the decision this board makes.
Yes, sir. You make a really good point, Dr. Brandon, about several, but one chiefly being, the chief one being the manageability of that and the capability of looking at those mitigation measures and from a distancing standpoint, from all those other things that you mentioned, that mask, temperature checks, and things like that. So, very good point.
I also, my mind went straight to the teachers who have kids who are gonna have to be doing their distance learning, remote learning. And that puzzle, of having them come in, just putting it, I don't have an answer for it, but just thinking of it, that it is a thing, and I know that we wanna take care of our staff in that regard. Are there any thoughts to that situation?
There's not anything built in budgetarily wise, space wise, staffing wise. There's way too many implications at this point to consider. And there's also liability risk that has to be balanced there. So I'm not saying that there's not anything I did as of yesterday. I do know by having the opportunity to sit on CARES Act Task Force here for the county that there is a provision that hopefully I'll be able to announce today that will be helpful in what your concern is. I think it will be very helpful. But as far as there are a lot of risks that we would assume in terms of providing those in our physical spaces for opportunities that, and I know you're not asking for that, you're just presenting the big problem that maybe we can help address. And I do think that there will be some amelioration based on what I may be able to announce this afternoon or tomorrow morning. But as far as the school system, at this point, we are not at a place where we can coordinate that.
Making a decision.
Yeah, I just looked at the calendar just so people would have a perspective of 6 weeks versus 9 weeks. The way I've got it is October 2nd would be 6 weeks. Does somebody else look at that too?
Yes, sir.
And then if you went 9 weeks, it would be October 23rd. So just, if that helps you make, am I correct in that?
And then we went 4 weeks.
4 weeks
We have
would
a
be.
meeting called pretty close at 4 weeks.
The 11th would be the end of 4 weeks.
Our regular scheduled meetings.
No, the 18th. 18th, sorry.
Is it 18th on a Friday, is the 21st? So the 21st is our regularly scheduled meeting on that Monday then, is that right?
October 21st meeting, if we went 6 and 4 or September, that would be, we would have a meeting following.
You would have 4 weeks complete on September 18th.
So that would fall in line, that would fall in line.
I'm looking at a phone, I can't see, I'm over 60, so somebody else.
Calendar,
But that,
paper.
that 4
Just
weeks
make
will
sure.
put us right in the middle of that supposed peak, right?
Right.
But, yeah, I mean, that, again, that's a projected number, a projected time, is that a good way of putting it? Mr. Moore?
Dr. Noe, was that right? Those 4 weeks, have you got your calendar?
I was looking at, yes, yeah, yes, that is accurate.
Okay, thank you. I
So
just didn't want to say something and not be.
That is accurate.
Yeah.
So regular board meeting, September 21, after the date that Dr. Brandon just gave, the close of that time would be September 18, and your next board, your regularly scheduled board meeting is September 21.
I have the 14th on my calendar.
I must have, and maybe we've changed that.
We might have changed it.
We might have changed it. It's just, that's a good, I'm glad you're mentioning that.
Anybody else know?
Mr. Lester, is there any way you can see what is on there?
Well, we
You know,
meet
we
Monday,
tip-
we can change
we
it
tip-
Monday if we want to.
Change it now.
Or-
We've got to make a decision, we still got to make a decision.
Oh,
on
that's
what we're
right.
gonna do.
That's right.
I just want to make sure the calendar pieces, as Dr. Brandon was attempting to do, make sure those are in front of everyone. I want to make sure that's September 14th, so Ms. Lowe, you're right, and I apologize, but typically we've done the Tuesday after Labor Day, and then we had 2 weeks to follow on that.
We left that one out this year.
So I'm remiss in saying that September 21 would be the regularly scheduled. Obviously, the board has, Mr. Chair and the board can change that, but right now, that's the schedule.
14th.
So 9 weeks and check after the 9 week period, no
6.
motion. We'd like to.
Is it possible and feasible to do a meet and greet of some sort where it's cut down, the numbers are cut down extremely and do it outside?
I'm not sure I'm able to answer that. I want to, the reason I'm hesitant is
Yeah.
not that it's not a viable option. I just want to make sure that I'm real careful to kind of look at whether or not we can pull that off. I know some school systems have done that. They've tried to do in small groups. Ours have already done that to some degree in different schools.
Some have done that,
And
they've
they've
had
actually-
drive-through meets and things like that, but, possible, yes. In my mind right now, I'm not able to envision how to do that with 700 students or 950 students or maybe even 600 students. But yes, it's possible. As a group in a whole setting, I'm not sure about that. Plus, we're against the clock a little bit, and planning that is not a simple endeavor. But many already have planned and are already engaging in some form. Now, yes, it's not the same as having that opportunity to be in class together and develop a relationship and rapport. But it is a meet and knowing a face, I guess.
I don't have a lot of wisdom, period, but conventional wisdom would suggest that we would look at those cases in which we either haven't, and Dr. Noe, if I misspeak, you just jump in, but where we haven't been able to make those connections, or it's less likely that a virtual conversation or a conference cannot transpire, then it behooves the principals and the teachers to work together to make sure that happens. So I do believe that it's viable and it's possible to make some sort of arrangement to make those connections. To do that widespread, I do agree with Dr. Noe. I think at this juncture, it might be rather challenging to say the least.
If it's not been planned, it would be difficult to
Yeah.
be planned at this point.
Not only challenging, but dangerous. People are outside in these darn lakes partying and swarping around, and that's where they're getting stuff. Ms. Morgan?
Yeah, but I see what she's saying, that if they've got something planned already to pick up materials and so forth, Ms. Smith could hang a, especially at the elementary age, and, I'm Miss Smith, and they can say, there's my teacher.
I don't know where exactly that has or has not
Right, and I'm
occurred,
not-
but there are places who have planned such.
They could enhance what they're doing already
Maybe, yes.
planned, potentially.
Yeah. So there is.
Without the numbers, without big numbers. We can't have big numbers.
It's
No,
more
it's
individual,
drive-through.
it's individual. I'm speaking on limited knowledge and memory, but I know they have a scheduled time for classes to drive through and
Right.
meet their teacher and maybe the counselor and the administrator, and it's distanced as a flow. Now, that may not be exact, but that's my understanding of what's occurred, at least in some places.
Not like all these drive-through graduations, so,
Yes.
gotcha.
And
I
we-
can live with that.
Well, I think you can trust this, is that if there's an opportunity to do that safely, and there's a creative way to think about it, this bunch in this room and out in this school community will figure out a way to do that and do it very safely. We'll work toward as best we can to make that happen.
So my next question then would be to, are we considering the vulnerable population? Is that possible? And is that not, is it possible, but is it also still dangerous? Do we want to risk that, or do we want to?
I would.
There may be some schools who will have groups of 2 or 3 with a family to get the Chromebook and introduce themselves. That is socially distanced mitigation practices in place, which is different, but it still should be safe.
I think you're headed toward the instruction.
Yes,
Is that what
that's,
you're-
Oh, I'm sorry.
it's
No,
okay.
no, that's all right. No, I
We
was-
jumped all over the
I was
place.
right where you are, and then I realized, I think I know what
She
she
stays
said.
2, paragraph 1.
She is,
Well, it's
she is
phase
going,
one,
she's going to
actually.
paragraph.
It's in 2, too.
Oh,
In the
okay.
big book and the little book and the
Yes.
side book.
All the things I've read, yeah.
Yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am. I think we, Dr. Noe and others, here on staff would need to, I feel like we need to meet with Ms. Phillips to consider that, but certainly the vulnerable populations is what is part of the consideration. There may be particular special needs situations that we would need to consider, a different arrangement outside of just 100% virtual. So that doesn't give you a clear answer, but I don't want to answer that question until we talked about this
Okay.
briefly yesterday, and I keep looking at, it is good that we're looking across the table, but I know he's already, Dr. Noe has talked with Ms. Phillips in special ed, and then we would need to talk with Judy Honecker Martin about some of the English learners populations. Those are the 2 out of the gate that we would.
As well as a couple partnerships that we have where students need extended services.
Yes. Yes, so you can't, we wouldn't want to blanketly say
Yeah.
that anyone, for example, has an IEP, this would happen. We might say, though, that there are some special circumstances that in order to offer proper placement, free appropriate education, all of those things that we're not just obligated to do, that we need to do for that particular child, I think we could have those discussions. Is that fair enough?
If the board agrees for us to be able to offer those services.
If you're agreeable, yes, thank you.
I add one more layer to that, where if we were to go with the first 6 weeks virtual, and we're talking about the possibilities of doing in-person services with some of our vulnerable students, are we including the pre-K-3 in that? At any point in that first 6 weeks, I guess is my question.
My recommendation would be that I think it would just be a nightmare to try to do it at this point. I mean, you take right now, even teachers, if we went back hybrid, you've got in-classroom instruction, you've got children that's 100% virtual, and then you've got your kids that's not there those 2 days, you're trying to do virtual for them, so, I mean, we're putting a lot on the plate right now for, and that's one reason I wanted to, I think we gotta do something, we gotta give them time to plan, and we gotta give a definite plan, we can't go back and forth, and like I said, changing on a dime, we've got to say, here's what we're gonna do for either 6 weeks or 9 weeks, and that's my opinion, and reevaluate at a reasonable amount of time and say, we're gonna continue doing this, or we're gonna look at doing maybe something like what you're saying, and if we can't go back. And with the goal being to get the children back in school as soon as possible, as everyone said today. Mr. Flynn?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion at this point that we begin school on August 24th, 100% virtual, with considerations for the vulnerable populations as needed. for 6 weeks, and to evaluate that after 4 weeks as to further considerations.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Fleener and a second by Ms. Hamilton to start school 100% virtual on August 24th. With looking at the vulnerable kids, instruction, additional instruction, and we do that for 6 weeks, and at the end of 4 weeks that we evaluate and to continue or change. Is that correct? Correct. Okay, have a motion, second, any discussion?
All right, in 6 weeks, what's that time frame? Is that right in the middle of September?
It's
October
October
2.
the
October
5th is the next Monday. October 2nd is the Friday.
So it'll be October what?
2.
2.
Well, I like the 9 weeks.
Mr. Brooks?
Yeah, well, with all the, teachers and everyone, be prepared to go teach virtual for that by next week, by the 24th.
We'll be prepared.
You'll be prepared. Okay.
All along, our mindset has been that we need to be prepared because we are going to be providing virtual instruction. So it will be different because this will be our focus for a while, for however many weeks. But we are prepared and we will be prepared. I think it's a good way to put it.
Also, the next week is a work week for everyone, I think. Is that right?
Yes,
It
sir.
is,
Yeah,
yes.
Will all the schools have enough time during that week or to get all the materials and everything out to the students? Will that be a hassle or not?
That's already been in process and
Okay.
planned as it, either way, so we should be okay. It's not gonna be it's gonna be different than if we were on the hybrid.
Right.
And so, we can't expect it to be exactly, but we don't have this number of students 2 days a week. And so the integration is gonna be a little different, but we'll get there.
And if there's any help needed at any of the schools, we'll give them the help to make sure they get everything out.
We'll do everything we can.
Okay, do everything. I understand it. Okay.
And we do realize there's a different support system
Right,
needed when
okay.
you do
All right.
virtual, mostly virtual experience for everyone. So we know we need to have those conversations about what types of, whether it be IT or other support that we need to have for our teachers.
I'd just like to ask Mr. Fleener if he would consider maybe just amend this slightly and say that it's just not our recommendation, but based on the information we received from the health officials and the information that we're, up-to-date health information that we're having, we're making that recommendation. If that suffices. Is that,
I'm good.
is everybody else okay with it? I think that's what we were here for.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
And do we need to add, I don't usually know how this works, but add about the stronger mitigation parameters of the teachers in the building? Is that? No.
That's administrative.
Okay, great,
Yeah,
great.
administrative.
Don't mind me.
That will be done.
Okay.
So, to clarify the motion, based upon the information we have received from the Virginia Department of Health and from other agencies, as far as transmission and what are those other two words?
Burden of disease, transmission, and trend.
Burden, transmission, and trend. The recommendation of this board is to, or the motion is to recommend starting school on the 24th, 100% virtual with consideration for the special cases for 6 weeks to reevaluate after 4 weeks.
Second.
Thank you.
I'm not gonna try to restate all that you said well, Mr. Fleener. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion? Motion's unanimous, thank you. Mr. Fleming.
I would also like to make a motion that we change, based upon what we just decided, that we change our September 14th meeting to September 21st, since the 4-week period will end on the 18th. And that would give us the 21st to make that reevaluation.
Second.
We have a motion to move the September 14th meeting to September 21st. And a second by Ms. Henderson. Any discussion?
Is there a reason to try to set a meeting the second week of September then? Are we gonna, if needed, or shall we hold a date right now?
Dr. Rattler, would you like to look at that between now and Monday night and see if there's a need to have an earlier meeting in September? And I don't recall why we, as you said, we typically have a meeting on Tuesday after Labor Day and then have one the third Monday, and I don't remember back why we did that. Would you look and see?
Yes, sir, I had a moment of
and
clarity after we talked about
and
that. I
then-
remember we talked about reducing the numbers.
We just split the difference.
We were
did.
cutting
We couldn't-
ourselves some
Yeah, we just
slack.
cut because school's opening and. there
But
wasn't anything
if there
going on.
is a need to have, if there is a need to have one early September,
Yes, sir.
we know we can make that decision.
Yes, sir, yeah, because that is a long haul between the 17th and that time. Yes, sir.
But there is a motion in the second to move the September 14th meeting to September 21st. Any further discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous, thank you.
Sure. No other discussion, I move we adjourn.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Henderson, a
Y'all
second by Ms.
stay
Hamilton,
around,
we
please.
adjourn. All those in favor? It's unanimous. And I'd like to thank everybody for their time this morning. I know we spent a little more time than we thought we would, but we've had a good discussion and we've done what we needed to do. So thank you very much for being here this morning.
Don't worry. Somebody
And what I said,
There's nothing we're gonna do.
It's sort of like that.